5 years ago, a woman walked into a hospital and gave her husband one of her kidneys.
I'm doing
3
everything
days
I
after the
can.
surgery, while she was still recovering, still weak, still in pain, he handed her divorce papers. He married her cousin 6 months later. The woman disappeared that same night. No one heard from her again, until last Tuesday, when that same man was rushed into the emergency room, dying, his body rejecting the kidney she gave him. And the doctor who walked through those doors, the one who now held his life in her hands, it was her. She's now the chief of transplant surgery. One signature could put him at the top of the transplant list and save his life. Or she could walk away, let the system handle it, let fate decide. Nobody would question her decision either way. This is a true story about a woman who gave her husband her kidney and watched him walk away with another woman. She disappeared for 5 years. When she came back, she wasn't broken anymore. She was a doctor, one of the best transplant surgeons in the country. And the man dying in her hospital? Her ex-husband. What she decided will change how you see forgiveness, justice, and moving on. Because when the person who destroyed you needs you most, what would you do? Let me take you back to where it all began. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we dive deeper, please like this video and subscribe. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's incredibly special knowing our stories are resonating with people across the globe. Before I tell you what happened in that hospital room, you need to understand 3 things. First, how does a woman go from lying in a hospital bed, broken and betrayed, to becoming the chief surgeon at one of the most respected hospitals in America? What happened in those 5 missing years? Where did she go? Because when Sarah Chen left Boston, she had nothing, no job, no home. Her medical career was on hold, her residency application withdrawn. She was recovering from major surgery with 1 kidney, a failed marriage, and a betrayal so deep it would have destroyed most people. Yet somehow, 5 years later, she walks back into the same city as chief of transplant surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. That transformation doesn't happen by accident. Something changed her during those missing years. Something pushed her to become not just a doctor, but one of the best in her field. Second, when someone takes everything from you and then shows up years later, needing the one thing only you can give them, what does that moment feel like? You give someone a piece of your body. You go through surgery, risk your life, endure months of recovery, all because you love them. And they repay that sacrifice by walking away with someone else. Then years pass. You rebuild yourself. You become successful, and suddenly that person is back, not because they want to apologize, but because they're dying. And you're the only one who can help them. The universe has handed you a choice most people only imagine in their darkest moments. The power to save or the power to walk away. So which do you choose? And third, when you have every right to walk away from someone who destroyed you, but you're also a doctor who took an oath to save lives, which part of you wins? Sarah Chen swore to do no harm, to treat every patient equally. That oath doesn't have an exception for people who hurt you. But Sarah is human. She remembers lying in that hospital bed reading divorce papers. She remembers seeing him with her cousin while she could barely walk. She remembers the phantom pain where her kidney used to be. All of that lives inside her. So when she walked into that ICU room and saw David Morrison unconscious, which Sarah showed up? The doctor or the ex-wife? Sarah never planned to come back to Boston. This city held too many painful memories. But 6 months ago, Massachusetts General Hospital offered her chief of transplant surgery at 33 years old. It was everything she'd worked for. Her mother warned her, asked if she was ready to return to the place that hurt her so badly. But Sarah realized something. You can't truly move on if you're still afraid. She had spent 5 years running and rebuilding. Coming back wasn't about the past anymore. It was about proving her past no longer had power over her. So she accepted. She wasn't running anymore. She thought she was strong enough to handle anything Boston could throw at her, until that Tuesday night in October when the ambulance brought David in. 7 years ago, Sarah Chen was 28 years old, in her final year of medical school at Boston University. She was the kind of student professors remembered, the one who could diagnose complex cases with a single look at a patient chart, who stayed late perfecting surgical techniques, who genuinely cared about every patient. Her attending physician said she had something rare, a combination of technical brilliance and deep compassion that couldn't be taught. Medicine was her calling, but it wasn't her only dream. Sarah believed in love, the deep, lasting kind she'd witnessed growing up in San Francisco, where her parents had been married for 40 years. She met David Morrison in the spring of 2016 at a hospital charity gala. He was 32, a commercial real estate developer, confident and charming. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. They talked for 4 hours about her dreams of becoming a surgeon, his plans to expand his business. He listened to her in a way that made her feel truly seen. 6 months later, David proposed under the cherry blossom trees in Boston Public Garden. Sarah said yes without hesitation. Her mother flew in for the engagement party and warned her, "When someone loves you quickly, make sure they don't leave you just as fast. Real love takes time to prove itself." But Sarah was too happy to listen. They married 6 months later in Cambridge. When David said his vows, promising to love her in sickness and in health, Sarah believed every word. For the first 2 years, life seemed perfect. Sarah started her residency. David's business grew. They bought a townhouse in Beacon Hill. But somewhere in year 2, things shifted. David worked later, came home distant. Their conversations became transactional. Sarah told herself it was normal, that this was what marriage became. Then one November evening, David collapsed at work. The diagnosis came back devastating. Acute kidney failure, a genetic condition destroying his kidneys. He needed a transplant. Without one, he had maybe 2 years. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Test me. Take mine." The compatibility tests came back perfect. 1 in 100,000 odds. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Sarah prepared with absolute certainty, recording a video message saying giving him life was her greatest honor. 3 days before surgery, Sarah came home early. She'd forgotten her textbooks. She heard laughter upstairs, a woman's laughter from their bedroom. She walked up the stairs and opened the door. David and Jessica, her cousin, in their bed. Sarah stood frozen. Finally, she spoke, her voice flat. "How long?" Jessica looked at the floor. 2 years. The entire length of their marriage had been a lie. Sarah turned and walked out, got in her car and drove for hours. At 2 a.m., her phone rang. David, desperate. "Please come home, we can work through this." Sarah's voice was calm, detached. "I'm still giving you the kidney." Silence. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I keep my promises, even when you couldn't." Her mother begged her not to. But Sarah's mind was made up out of principle, out of proving she was better than them. The surgery was successful. Sarah woke up with 1 kidney and a marriage that was over. 3 days later, while still in the hospital, barely able to walk, a process server arrived. David had filed for divorce. His lawyer argued the kidney donation was voluntary and unrelated to the marriage. 2 weeks later, being helped to a car, Sarah saw them. David and Jessica leaving the hospital together, his arm around her, both laughing. David caught her eye. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." That night, Sarah disappeared. She abandoned her lease, disconnected her phone, withdrew her residency application. Her mother received 1 text. "I'm okay. I need to disappear. Please don't look for me." For 5 years, no one heard from Sarah Chen. She became a ghost. David married Jessica 6 months later, and life moved on. But where did Sarah go for those 5 years? Her friends searched for her. Her former classmates tried to track her down. Her mother only received occasional texts saying she was safe, that she needed time. The truth is, Sarah went west. She bought a one-way bus ticket to Los Angeles. She arrived in a city where nobody knew her story. She found a tiny studio apartment and took a job at a free clinic in East LA, working as a medical assistant under a different name, Ella Martin. She worked 12-hour shifts, saved every dollar, slept on a mattress on the floor. She owned 3 sets of scrubs and 2 pairs of jeans, nothing else. But at night, lying on that mattress, Sarah made herself a promise. She would become the doctor she was always meant to be. For 18 months, Sarah worked during the day and studied at night. She retook her medical boards, scoring in the top percentile. She applied to residency programs, explaining the gap with a statement about medical recovery and family obligations. She didn't mention the divorce or the kidney. 3 programs rejected her. 7 never responded. But Seattle Grace Hospital took a chance on her. She moved to Seattle and attacked residency with obsessive intensity. She volunteered for every surgery, every overnight shift, every complicated case, and she focused on one specialty: transplant surgery. Every kidney she helped transplant was a piece of herself she was taking back. Every life she saved was proof she was more than what David made her feel. Within 2 years, she'd become the most skilled resident in her program. By year 4, the broken woman who left Boston no longer existed. She'd been replaced by someone harder, sharper, more focused. She published research. She was invited to national conferences. She was offered positions across the country. Then, 6 months ago, the call came from Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, chief of transplant surgery, at 33 years old. Most people would have said no, would have chosen any other city. But Sarah saw it differently. Going back wasn't about confronting her past. It was about proving her past no longer mattered. She accepted and moved back to the city that destroyed her. For 6 months, everything went perfectly. She ran her department with precision. She performed impossible surgeries. She never thought about David, never drove past their old neighborhood, never looked him up. He might as well have never existed, until that Tuesday night in October. Sarah was in her office when her pager went off. Code blue in the ICU. She grabbed her stethoscope and ran. She'd responded to hundreds of codes. This was routine. She pushed through the door of room 7, ready to save whoever was dying on that bed. And then she saw his face. David Morrison, her ex-husband, lying there unconscious, tubes running from his arms, machines beeping frantically. Sarah froze. 5 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled in that single moment. A young resident was talking about vitals and blood pressure, but Sarah couldn't hear him. All she could see was David's face. The resident touched her arm. "Dr. Chen." "We need you." Sarah snapped back. She was a doctor. This was a patient. She'd taken an oath. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "What's his status?" the resident explained. "Acute organ rejection. The transplanted kidney was failing. David needed another transplant immediately, or he'd die within 48 hours. Sarah looked at the chart. The kidney that was failing was hers. The organ she'd given him was being rejected by his body. His body was finally doing what she'd wanted to do back then. The resident continued. "He's type AB negative, very rare. No matches available. Without emergency priority designation, he'll have to wait. And given his medical history and compliance issues, he might not make it." Sarah saw it in the chart. Multiple missed appointments, inconsistent medication adherence, medical non-compliance, a legitimate reason to deny priority. She stood there, holding that chart with the power to decide if David lived or died. One signature and he'd go to the top of the list. No signature, and he'd wait his turn, which probably meant he wouldn't make it. Nobody would question either decision. The resident was waiting. The nurses were waiting. Sarah realized this moment was what 5 years had been building toward. The universe had handed her a choice she never asked for: save the man who destroyed her, or let him face consequences, justice or mercy, revenge or forgiveness. Which person had she become? Sarah's hand tightened around the chart. She thought about lying in her hospital bed reading divorce papers. She thought about seeing him with Jessica while she could barely walk. She thought about the year sleeping on a mattress in LA, rebuilding from nothing. Every instinct was screaming at her to walk away, to finally get the justice she'd been denied. But then she saw something on David's bedside table. A photograph. Face down. Sarah picked it up. A little girl, maybe 4 years old. Dark curls, bright smile. David holding her at what looked like a birthday party. A nurse noticed Sarah staring. That's his daughter, Emma. She's in the waiting room with her mother. Poor thing keeps asking when her daddy's coming home. Sarah set the photo down. Her jaw tightened. Her hand trembled slightly. Everything changed. This wasn't about David anymore. This wasn't about what he deserved. There was a 4-year-old girl in the waiting room who had no idea her father was dying. A child who didn't choose this, who didn't betray anyone, who just wanted her dad to come home. Sarah understood something she'd spent 5 years learning. That little girl deserved a father, even if he was flawed, even if he'd made terrible choices. That child was innocent, and Sarah refused to let an innocent child suffer for her father's mistakes, because that would make her just like him. And she'd spent 5 years becoming better than that. Sarah took a breath and signed the form. Emergency priority status approved. The resident looked surprised. Dr. Chen, are you sure? His compliance record... Sarah cut him off. I'm sure. Prep him for surgery. If we get a match, I'll perform the operation myself. The team moved into action. Sarah walked to her office, closed the door, and for the first time in 5 years, let herself feel everything. The anger, the pain, the unfairness. She'd just signed a form to save the man who destroyed her. Nobody in that room knew the truth. Nobody knew she was his ex-wife. Nobody knew that failing kidney was hers. But Sarah knew she'd made the right choice. Not because David deserved it, but because she refused to let a child lose her father over wounds that belonged to the past. She pulled up David's medical file. If she was going to save his life, she needed to understand what she was dealing with. The file told an unexpected story. After their divorce, David's health had declined rapidly, missed appointments, stopped taking medications, ignored doctors' warnings. It was self-destruction. Sarah kept reading. Financial records showed his business had collapsed 3 years ago. He'd lost everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle. He was working as a property manager now, barely covering child support. The man who'd seemed so successful had fallen apart. Sarah didn't feel satisfaction, just sadness. Sad that he'd wasted the second chance she gave him. Sad that his daughter might grow up without a father because he couldn't take care of himself. 3 hours later, her pager went off. Organ donor match found. Type AB negative kidney available. Surgery scheduled for midnight. Sarah grabbed her coat and headed to pre-op. In a few hours, she'd be cutting open the man who betrayed her, removing the kidney she'd given him, replacing it with a new one. The situation felt absurd, but this was real. Sarah scrubbed in with her team, going through the familiar ritual. She'd performed hundreds of transplants. This was just another procedure, except it wasn't. As David was wheeled into the operating room, unconscious, Sarah stood over him and looked at his face. This was the man she'd loved enough to marry, the man she'd given part of her body to save. And now, 5 years later, she was about to save him again. The operating room door opened. Someone walked in. Sarah looked up, and her breath caught. Jessica, David's wife, Sarah's cousin. Jessica went pale when she recognized Sarah. Sarah, I didn't know you were back in Boston. Sarah's voice was calm, empty of emotion. Mrs. Morrison, your husband is going into surgery. You should wait in the family room. Jessica's hands shook. Sarah, please, I need to explain. I'm so sorry for what happened. Sarah held up her hand. I'm going to save your husband's life tonight. Not because he deserves it, not because you're asking, but because there's a little girl who needs her father. Now please leave, I have work to do. Jessica started crying, but Sarah had already turned away. Sarah walked into the operating room and the doors closed. For the next 9 hours, nothing existed except the surgery. Sarah worked with precision that bordered on artistry. Every cut perfect, every suture exact. This was where Sarah belonged. This was who she'd become. Not David's ex-wife, not the woman who got betrayed, but Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the best transplant surgeons in the country. At hour 7, something went wrong. David's blood pressure dropped suddenly. The monitors screamed. A nurse called out numbers that meant he was dying. They were losing him. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Increase epinephrine. Massage the heart. We don't lose patience in my OR. She worked frantically, expertly. Minutes felt like hours. And then his heart stabilized. The new kidney began functioning. David Morrison would live. Sarah had saved him again. Sarah walked into the operating room and the doors closed behind her. For the next 9 hours, nothing existed except the surgery. Sarah worked with precision that bordered on artistry. Every cut perfect, every suture exact. Her team moved around her like a well-choreographed dance. This was where Sarah belonged. This was who she'd become. Not David's ex-wife, not the woman who got betrayed, but Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the best transplant surgeons in the country, saving lives, because that's what she was born to do. At hour 7, David's blood pressure dropped suddenly. The monitors started screaming. A nurse called out numbers that meant he was dying. They were losing him. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, steady and commanding. Increase epinephrine. Massage the heart manually. We don't lose patience in my OR. She worked frantically, her hands moving with absolute certainty. Minutes felt like hours. And then his heart stabilized. The new kidney began functioning. David Morrison would live. Sarah closed him up, removed her mask, and walked out of the operating room exhausted but steady. She went to the family waiting room where Jessica sat with red, swollen eyes. The moment Jessica saw Sarah in the doorway, still in her surgical scrubs, she stood up, her face desperate with fear and hope. Sarah's voice was professional, detached. The surgery was successful. He's going to be fine. The transplant took well. He'll need recovery time, but he'll live. Jessica broke down, sobbing, her whole body shaking with relief. She tried to approach Sarah, tried to hug her, but Sarah stepped back. Jessica's voice came out broken. Thank you so much. I don't deserve your help. I know I don't. After everything I did to you, after how much I hurt you, I don't deserve anything from you. But thank you for saving him. Thank you for giving Emma her father back. Sarah stood there for a moment, looking at the woman who had betrayed her, the woman who had destroyed her marriage, and she felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no need for revenge or reconciliation. Just nothing. Jessica was crying, waiting for Sarah to say something, anything. Finally, Sarah spoke. I didn't do this for you, Jessica. I didn't even do it for David. I did it for his daughter. That little girl deserves a father, even if he's flawed. When David wakes up, tell him that Dr. Chen saved his life. Tell him the truth. And tell him I hope he becomes a man worthy of the second chance he's been given. Sarah turned to leave. Jessica called after her, her voice desperate. Sarah, wait. Please. Can we talk? Can I explain? Can I tell you how sorry I am? Sarah stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. Her next words would define everything. You want to know why I saved him, Jessica, after everything you both did to me. It's simple. The best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's becoming so successful, so strong, so far above them that their suffering doesn't even register anymore. It's becoming someone they could never hurt again. I saved David tonight because I'm a doctor, and that's what doctors do, but also because seeing him on that table, broken and dying, didn't make me feel good. It just reminded me how small he always was, how small you both were, and how much bigger I've become. Sarah walked away down that hospital corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She didn't look back. Jessica stood there alone in the waiting room, Sarah's words hitting her like physical blows. And that was the last time Sarah Chen spoke to anyone from her old life. She transferred David's post-surgery care to another surgeon. She had no need to see him recover. No curiosity about whether he'd change. No unfinished business. 2 days later, Sarah was in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Chen, there's a package for you at reception. No return address. Sarah went downstairs and found a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. She opened it in her office. Inside was a handwritten letter and a photograph. The photo showed David in his hospital bed, awake now, holding his daughter, Emma. The little girl was smiling, her arms wrapped around her father's neck. The letter was from David. Sarah almost threw it away without reading it, but something made her unfold the pages. His handwriting was shaky, probably written while still weak from surgery. The letter started simply. Sarah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to write to you after everything I did, but I need you to know something. Jessica told me the truth. She told me you were my surgeon, that you saved my life, that you could have walked away and didn't. The letter continued. I spent 5 years trying not to think about what I did to you, trying to justify it, minimize it, pretend it wasn't as bad as it was. But lying in that hospital bed, knowing I was dying, knowing that the kidney you gave me was failing, I finally understood what I threw away. You gave me everything, Sarah. Your love, your trust, part of your body, and I treated all of it like it was worthless. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was selfish and weak and stupid. Jessica and I, we're not happy. We haven't been for years. She stays because of Emma. I stay because I have nowhere else to go. What we did to you destroyed us too, just slower. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a second chance. I already wasted that. I'm just asking you to know that I finally understand. You were always the strong one, the good one. And I was always going to disappoint you because I was never in your league. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for being better than me. I hope one day I can be half the person you are. For Emma's sake. She deserves better than who I've been. Sarah read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge it, didn't let it change anything. Because here's what Sarah had learned in those 5 years in the wilderness. The people who hurt you don't get to be part of your healing. They don't get to witness your success and feel good about themselves for acknowledging their mistakes. They don't get closure or forgiveness or a chance to ease their guilt. They get to live with what they did. And you get to live without them. Sarah closed the drawer and went back to work. She had patients to see, surgeries to perform, lives to save. David Morrison was just another successful case in her file now, nothing more, nothing less. And that, more than anything, was her victory. The next morning, Sarah stood on the hospital rooftop with a coffee in her hand, watching the sun rise over Boston. The city that once destroyed her was just a city now. Buildings, streets, nothing more. She felt peaceful in a way she hadn't felt in years. David had recovered and been discharged 3 weeks later. Sarah never saw him during his recovery. She'd transferred his care immediately after surgery. She had no need to see him, no curiosity about his progress. No unfinished business. According to hospital records, he made a full recovery and went home to his daughter. Whether he became a better man after that, Sarah didn't know and didn't care, because that wasn't her story anymore. Her story was about what she'd built from the ashes of her worst moment. Here's what Sarah learned in those 5 years that transformed her from victim to survivor. She learned that the people who hurt you don't deserve your destruction. They deserve your indifference. They deserve to become footnotes in a story where you're the hero. She learned that keeping your humanity when someone tries to steal it isn't weakness. It's power. Real power. The kind that can't be taken away. She learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so well, achieving so much, becoming so successful that the person who broke you realizes too late what they lost. And by then, you're so far ahead that their regret doesn't even matter anymore. 3 months after the surgery, David saw Sarah on the local news. She'd won a national award for her transplant research. She was being interviewed, talking about second chances and saving lives. According to someone who knew him, David watched that interview and said one sentence: "I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." But Sarah never thought about David anymore. He'd become irrelevant. Not forgiven, not hated, just irrelevant. Today, Dr. Sarah Chen is one of the most respected transplant surgeons in the country. She's saved over 300 lives since that night. She's published groundbreaking research. She's mentored dozens of young doctors. She never remarried, not because she's broken, but because she learned something more valuable than romance. She learned how to be whole by herself. Her mother asked her once, a year after the surgery, "Do you regret giving him the kidney after everything he did?" Sarah thought about it for a long time before answering, "No, Mama, I don't, because that kidney taught me who I am. I'm the kind of person who keeps promises even when others break theirs. I'm the kind of person who chooses mercy when I have every right to choose revenge. And I wouldn't trade that for anything." This story isn't about David Morrison or Jessica. It's about Sarah. It's about a woman who lost everything and built something better from nothing. It's about the choice we all face when someone betrays us. Do we become bitter or do we become better? Do we let them define our story or do we take control and write our own ending? Sarah chose to become better. And in doing so, she didn't just survive her nightmare, she transcended it. Because at the end of the day, David got to live, but Sarah got to thrive. And there's no comparison between those two outcomes. The man who took her kidney, her marriage, and her trust got a second chance at life. But Sarah got something more valuable. She got to become someone she was proud of, someone strong, someone who couldn't be broken by the past, someone who proved that your worst moment doesn't define you. How you rise from it does. So now I ask you, if you were Sarah standing in that ICU room staring at the person who destroyed you, what would you have done? Would you have signed that form and saved him? Or would you have walked away and let fate decide? Drop your answer in the comments, because here's what this story taught me. There's no single right answer. Some of you will say Sarah was too kind, that David deserved consequences, that mercy without justice is meaningless. Others will say she did the only thing she could live with, that revenge would have made her just like them. Both are valid. Both are true. Because life isn't simple. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose mercy when you have every right to choose revenge. But here's what I know for certain. Sarah Chen walked out of that hospital 5 years ago, broken. And she walked back in unbreakable. That's the real victory. If this story moved you, comment "still here" if you made it all the way through. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they can survive their worst betrayal and come out stronger. And if you're going through something right now, if someone broke your heart or your trust, remember Sarah. 5 years from now, you could be exactly where you need to be. Stronger, wiser, free. Your story isn't over. The people who hurt you are just chapters. Painful ones, yes, but just chapters. You're the whole book. Make it a good one.